The very first step that you have to do when you start writing a Node.js app is to create a package.json file. You saw this file briefly in the past section. A package.json file holds metadata about your app, such as a list of dependencies, a reference to the entry point or the exact file that you're going to run when you have to start your app, and much more. This is also required when you deploy your app in a production environment, such as when we'll deploy our app on Heroku. At that time, the package.json is used by the deployment environment to set up dependencies, and in the case of Heroku, for instance, for setting up the correct version of Node.js itself, among several other things. So without further ado, let's start this project by creating our package.json file. Now, with sufficient knowledge, you can simply write this file yourself, but npm makes this really easy for us. I am inside a blank folder called chatcat, which is where we'll be building our app. On the console, I'll type npm space init and press enter. This starts a wizard of sorts and it will ask you a couple of questions. The first one is the name of your app. This is absolutely required and you cannot leave it as a blank value. Here you cannot use uppercase characters and or spaces, though you can use an underscore or other special characters. My advice: avoid special characters as a general practice. A simpler option is to just press enter. In this case, the default name chatcat is picked up from the name of the folder in which you're creating this package.json. You can see the name in the brackets here. Do note that if you've got spaces in the name of your folder, this will not work as spaces are not permitted. Alright, the next thing it asks you is a version number. This uses semantic versioning, as I had explained in one of the earlier screencasts. We'll leave this as 1.0.0 here. Press enter again and it will ask for a description of your app, and you can pretty much leave this empty as well. The next thing it asks you to set is the entry point. Now, remember when I had said in a previous screencast that your Node.js app follows the same structure as any package that you download from npm? Imagine for a minute that the app we are building is a reusable module that does something, and users would want to download it using the npm install command and would want to use it in their apps by using the require statement. In such a scenario, when the module is called in using a require statement, it is the file that you mention here in the entry point section that is invoked, and this is the starting point for your module. I leave it to defaults because we don't need this in our example. We'll get back to this in a moment. The next thing is the test command. If you're used to writing test-driven apps, then this input will take in a command that will be used to run this app in test mode. Of course, this requires the Node.js app to be built that way using a test suite. But once you set the test command, you can just type npm test on the console and the command here will execute. For now, we'll leave this as empty. Next up, if you're going to put your app, such as in the case if you're writing a reusable module on GitHub, then you can include the URL to the exact repository for the module here. This is useful if you've got contributors to your module. Again, we'll just leave this as empty. Next up is keywords to make your package appear in searches if you're hosting it on a public repository, for instance, and we'll leave this blank as well. Next is the name of the author of this app. I leave this blank, but you can put your name here followed by your email ID inside a pair of angle brackets or chevrons if you may. And finally, npmInit will ask you for the type of open source license that you're creating this package under. Choices here can include MIT, Apache, GNU, GPL, and so on. Leaving it blank defaults it to the ISC or the Internet Software Consortium license, which basically states that the person who downloads this is free to use, copy, modify, and or distribute this software for any purpose without a fee. Finally, if everything looks okay, press enter and npm creates a package.json file for us in this folder, which looks like this. Now, I must mention that the package.json file provides a lot of options and we'll see quite a lot of them in due course of time. As an example, when we deploy our ChatCat app on the cloud, we want to tell our deployment environment, Heroku in our case, to set up a particular version of Node.js. This is important in many situations, given the fact that Node.js is evolving rapidly and a later version might not support certain features which you have at the time of development. In that case, if you were to deploy the app written using an older version of Node, Heroku and several other cloud platforms would just install the most recent version of Node.js automatically, and that might just break your app. Fortunately, this can be prevented. So, I'm writing this app using Node.js 4.2.2 LTS. What I'll do is create a key called engines right after the license entry in the package.json, and I'll set it to an object like so. Inside the object, I'll create a key called node and I'll simply set it to 4.2.2. And that's it. When we deploy this app later in this section, you'll see how Heroku downloads version 4.2.2 specifically for this app. By the way, though you'll see me developing this app on Node.js 4.2.2, I've tested it on versions as newer as 5.6.0 and it works well. Since Node.js is evolving rapidly, I cannot vouch for compatibility with future versions of Node if a certain feature is deprecated or changed at a later stage. If you come across such a problem, please email me about it and I'll help you resolve the issue. Now, let's create a file called server.js, and this will be the file that you're going to start your app with. What we can do now is go into our package.json, and in the scripts category, we'll create an entry called start, and we'll set it to node space server.js, or basically the command that will run your app. This tells Heroku and other cloud platform providers to start your app using this command. So let's put something in our server.js. And now you can go to the console and type nodemon and press enter. And nodemon should be able to start your app automatically because nodemon reads your package.json and is able to use the start command to run your app. When you do try to run your app this way, you'll notice that nodemon throws a crash error saying that it is unable to find a certain index.js file. Now the reason that happens is because the start setting wants to start your app using the given command, whereas there is an entry point defined in our package.json in a key called main, which points to a file called index.js. Since we are not building a reusable module here, we can safely remove the main key and its entry like so. Save the file, and nodemon detects that you have saved some file in the folder and attempts to restart a file called index.js and can't find it and shows an error again. Didn't we just remove the main key and the reference to index.js? Well, yes we did, but the package.json is read only once when we issue the nodemon command on the console. So in this situation, we can use Ctrl+C to exit nodemon and you can restart it like so. And this time, as expected, our server.js starts up and displays welcome to ChatCat on the console. I'm going to exit nodemon for now and we'll get back to it later. Now, since we want to use Express for building this app, now would be a good time to download the Express package. To do so, on the console, type npm install express followed by the @ and I'll type 4.13.3. If you don't mention the @ and the version number, npm will download the most recent version, which may not work for you since newer versions often deprecate features that may have been shown in this example. So we would want to download the exact version of every module as I have used when building this example. npm hosts all versions, so you will always be able to download a particular version. We'll also follow it up by typing --save and press enter. npm will now take a while to download the Express module package onto your hard drive. When it is done, you'll notice a new entry in your package.json called dependencies, which is an object, and it now shows up Express as a dependency with the 4.13.3 version preceded by a caret symbol. The reason why we have the dependencies section in our package.json is because we used the --save argument when using the npm install statement. This section is absolutely essential to allow your cloud platform provider to set up these dependencies when you deploy your app. Essentially, we never upload the packages we use when we build a Node.js app, and these are set up directly on the server instance using the entries made in the dependencies section in the package.json file. Now, the caret symbol here means that whenever you deploy the app or reinstall your dependencies using the npm install command on the console, the version of Express or any other dependencies listed here can drift across the minor and patch versions. So for instance, if I were to run npm install in about 6 months from now, I might get a later version of Express, perhaps something like 4.2.1 or as released by the Express team. This is as long as Express doesn't jump to version 5.x.x, which would mean a major version change. The trouble with this is that developers end up deprecating or modifying feature implementations even across minor revisions, and this can spell problems if you were to deploy this app as long as that caret symbol is in place. So either you can remove the caret manually, which is a lot of work, or you can prefer installing modules using the --save-exact argument like so. This way, the exact version of a module appears in the package.json and will ensure you get precisely this version down to the patch version as mentioned. All said and done, npm downloads Express and places it in a folder called node_modules inside your project folder like so. So go ahead and set up your package.json file and also download Express as shown.